Hi everyone, my name is Kimberly, and for my online research presentation I will be talking about the murder case of Adam Walsh. So Adam Walsh is the son of John Walsh, host of America's Most Wanted, and on July 27, 1981, Adam Walsh, at 6 years old, was abducted from the Mall of Hollywood, Florida, and weeks later his severed head was found. And the case went cold after a while due to law enforcement misplacing evidence as well as not having the technology that we do have today in order for them to solve the case. Otis Toole has been the prime suspect of this case. Toole is a serial killer, and he was arrested for an arson incident as well as a firearm incident. And later in jail, he had confessed to the murder of Adam Walsh. But the tricky part is that later he recanted his confessions as well as changing his story multiple times. Years later, before Toole's deathbed, he actually admitted again to murdering Adam Walsh. And in 2008, they have closed the case, naming Otis Toole to be the murderer of Adam Walsh. And some of the things I mentioned were from the Loyola Public Interest Law Reporter, facing the compliance deadline for the Adam Walsh Child Protection and Safety Act. States are weighing at all costs, by Liz Winiarski. And this has been taken from a book called Secret Parts of Fortune, 3 Decades of Intense Investigations and Edgy Euphemism. And the other is The Serial Killer Files, the Who, What, Where, How, and Why the World's Most Terrifying Murderers. Something I was curious about after reading and looking into this case was how much can confessions be trusted, because this case is mostly based on confession, and his confession wasn't really reliable since it changed so many times. And I wanted to look into interrogation, how are interrogations done. Besides that, Toole has an intellectual disability, so what would be the proper way to interrogate someone who has this disability? And he is also antisocial. So, how do you talk to someone? What goes on in that room when somebody is being questioned? So, moving on to confessions, a confession has been mostly viewed as a very important piece of evidence, especially in this case where there's little to no evidence besides Toole's confession. And it has an even stronger impact in the courtroom, especially with his testimony, because, normally a person wouldn't right away say that they are guilty of a crime, or it would take them a while, or they wouldn't say it at all. But in this case, when there is a confession, it's taken into account really easily, and that's what a lot of people think about this case is, oh, because he confessed, he is the murderer because he said it and he didn't hold back on it. But there also is the idea of false confessions. And a false confession can occur for many reasons. One of being that the person wants that fame and attention. Everybody knows who they are. They're on the newspapers, and being talked about and just getting that attention. And there's also the idea of wanting the case to just be over and finish with, and just settling it right there. This case especially, I think, has a false confession has to do with the result of police interrogation and police interrogation tactics. Now, some other techniques can be manipulation, minimizing the offense that has been committed. So saying, oh, if you confess, then we'll give you this amount of time in jail, or you won't be in jail for too long. Also giving them excuses or possibly threatening the suspect. And they can even inflict physical pain on the suspect, especially torture. And this is still, these tactics are still prevalent in today, where there's a lot of people still in jail for crimes they haven't committed, but somehow in the interrogation process, it made them able to confess to something they didn't do, or twist their words in a way from which they didn't do anything wrong. It was just the way how they were interrogated and answered those questions. Going deeper from interrogation, especially in Toole's sense, he has a disability, and the tactics with interrogation are very challenging for somebody who has a disability. And not just challenging, but they might not even speak the truth, or they might be coerced easily instead of telling the truth. This was taken from Effects of Personality Interrogation Techniques and Plausibility in an Experimental False Confession Paradigm. And this has been taken from The False Confessions in the Lab, a review from Erasmus Law by Eric Rassin and Han Israelis. So after investigation tactics and interrogation tactics, I wanted to look more into how that affects somebody when they have mental health or mental disabilities, and see how that affects them, because that is different from somebody who is very cunning or very smart. And in this case, it's different, especially for Toole. So experts believe that he has suffered from an intellectual disability, ADHD, dyslexia, epilepsy, illiteracy, and paranoid schizophrenia. And back then, understanding and treating these disabilities are very, very different from how it is treated now. Going back to interrogation tactics really quickly, interrogation tactics are designed to mislead, and they try to often deceive the suspects of what they think they know and the evidence against them. And interrogators will often try to dominate and stop a person when they deny that they have done something. And this really would affect somebody who has a mental disability, because one researcher found that an arrest was 67 times greater for somebody who has mental illness and versus somebody who doesn't, and that associates with like criminal and violence. Individuals are also more overly compliant when they are responding to questions. They would rather express questions they're asked rather than understanding their Miranda rights and what they choose to say and what they choose not to say. They also rely on indication of what's correct and what's not correct, what people want to hear, and not really thinking about it. That being said, people can have failure of knowledge, failure of confidence when they're responding, as well as reality monitors. Some people can imagine, and and that's that reality for them. And with that being said, there actually was an attorney that has spoken to Toole, and he basically said that speaking to Toole was a waste of his time. Quoting from his website, H. Ellis Armistead said that it was like Toole was interviewing the interviewers, and he said that they got some information from the detectives, and then what Toole would do was spin off that knowledge and give details, and give enough details in order for them to be like, okay, the case is closed, and then tell the families that the case is closed and the murder has been solved. And these are some of the things that can lead to false confession. Somebody who has social interactions, like with Toole being antisocial or having a disability, they can be manipulated into thinking otherwise, and that's probably how that affected Toole and telling the police that he murdered Adam Walsh, because his stories don't connect and it always changes, so it's not really reliable. And this was found in the book Sexual Forensics, Lust, Passion, and Psychopathic Killers. This has been researched from The Mental Health Status and Vulnerability to Police Interrogation Tactics by William C. Follett.